Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, can I thank the small number of people here who are not actually members of the repertory company of intellectuals who've been discussing democracy today for coming, and to say how much I hope you enjoy the event. But this is a book signing by two very distinguished authors who've been speaking at our conference. And I'm going to apologize for starting late slightly. I'm afraid that one of the guests inadvertently took the taxi that was meant for all of them. This is a feature of advanced capitalist society, of course, which we now live in, taking other people's taxis. But now that we're all here, can I just say that we are very happy as the Danube Institute to be associated with this event. There are here, I was happy to see 3 books. There's one copy of my own book on Reagan, Thatcher and the Pope, and it's available, I suppose, for sale since it's out there. Secondly, there is the book, The Demon in Democracy, by Professor Ryszard Legutko, who is here, a distinguished Polish intellectual, a member of the European Parliament, a former Minister for Education in the Polish government, and to my mind, the most interesting job he's had was as editor of the Underground Philosophy magazine associated with Solidarity during the communist period. That's a position that might come from a novel by G.K. Chesterton, but it was a real position and a real job of work in those days, and obviously we all owe you a debt for that. But since then, you've been examining the state of what is now no longer Western democracy, but European democracy, and you've got some strong criticisms to make of it, and I think very fruitful and interesting and often surprising ones. So I'd like to welcome you for that reason, Richard, and there is the book. And secondly, our second guest here is David Satter, a journalist as distinguished as Professor Legutko is in philosophy and politics, and in particular someone who has got experience of living and working in the Soviet Union in the past, and more recently in Moscow, from which incidentally he holds a signal honor. He is the first journalist to be expelled from modern Russia, post-communist Russia, since the end of the Cold War. And that should be your first line on any CV that you should be applying for a new job. So David's book, which is just out, I think, and both books are new. I'm sorry, now, pardon the title moment. It was a long time ago, and The Less You Know, the Better You Sleep. And his earlier book, It Was a Long Time to Go, and It Never Happened. A long time ago, and it never happened. And there's one copy of the earlier.
The Russian proverbs.
Yeah, Russian proverbs. And very accurate ones. So, I'd like to welcome our two guests. I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to hand over to Tony, who unfortunately is now engaged in conversation, and the owner of the bookstore. Tony?
We're very honored to have both guests here. We really depended on John and Melissa to tell us that this conference was taking place and that the authors were coming, and we put, if you want, our logistical know-how to use to get these books here in time. And in general, I like to, if you want, contribute to efforts such as those of the Danube Institute, such as those of authors and writers in promoting their books. I'm, if you want, a help for that, and I try to make sure that the books are here not only on time, but they continue to be used. We do publicity for them, people can order them, and with time, it's now 25 years, we have acquired a lot of regular customers who have been of much help to us by suggesting other titles which we did not know, and so it has become not only, if you want, our bookshop, mine and my colleagues, but rather it's a common effort of the users of the bookshop, because what is on the shelf reflects their taste and their needs as well.
Thank you. And I think Melissa has got something to add.
If you buy a book, walk across the street to Urban Backyard, where you'll be treated to 2 glasses of wine. And I think a tour of the museum downstairs, which is just there. There. I don't know if you've been in before or not. It's a lovely new restaurant and museum. And they have one of those little wine machines downstairs. And you pick the two you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to you all for coming. And after I was expelled from what's called the Russian Federation, although I never understood that name when the governors are appointed, but and the regents can't elect their representatives, but they call it Russian Federation. So I was expelled from that. And I decided that the time had come to summarize the history of the country since the fall of the Soviet Union, really to explain how Russia got to the state where it's expelling journalists, invading other countries, and in general behaving badly. So that's the reason for the book. And if any of you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I've had trouble getting a forum oftentimes. In Paris, I was supposed to speak at Sciences Po, which is really one of the most prestigious institutes of higher learning in France, and my appearance was canceled. So I would like to thank this bookstore for not canceling this event and allowing this to take place. The most controversial part of the book, I think, is the description of the role of terrorism in the creation of the present Russian state and the present Russian regime. So if any of you have any questions, I'd be glad to react to them, because I think that brevity is the soul of wit in a situation like this. And but oftentimes responding to questions is a lot more fruitful than just talking. Yeah, please.
How will it end?
How will it all end? Oh. I think that the Russian regime has, Bismarck said that Russia is never as strong as it seems or as weak as it seems. He also said there are 2 things we can never know: what the weather will be tomorrow and what's going to happen in Russia. And I think Russia remains as unpredictable as it was in Bismarck's time. I think that the regime is inherently unstable. I think the nature of a regime based on corruption and propaganda, and not to mention raw material prices, is unstable. Because instability ought to be defined by the capacity of a country to withstand internal or external shocks. A country can appear to be very stable. Russia appeared stable on the eve of the First World War, although the Tsar was warned that if he went to war, the result would be a social revolution. Because the situation that had evolved in Russia at that time was fundamentally unstable, even though the instability was not obvious to everyone. And I think that Russia today is an unstable system, an unstable situation. And so we don't know what external circumstances will bring, what how the internal situation will evolve. Who could have predicted, in fact, the Euromaidan revolt in Ukraine? Before it happened, months before it happened, it was generally thought that the Yanukovych regime in Ukraine was there forever, because that's the pattern in post-Soviet countries. In the countries of the former Soviet Union, the leader is dictator for life, as Putin aspires to be. So I can't answer the question directly, but I think that the Russian regime is by its nature unstable, and it's important, insofar as the West can have any influence at all, to try to support those forces and that truthful version of history that can be a source of support for a positive outcome if change comes to Russia, which it could.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's proper and to me very satisfying that we can have this even here in the first city of Budapest and in Hungary. Hungary is mentioned several times in my book and always in a positive context. The book is largely about the problems that I have had for some time with the political system in which we are all living. I'm writing it from Polish perspective, from someone who's lived his entire life in Poland, but I assume it's Hungarian experience is roughly the same, perhaps sometimes more dramatic than our own, but generally I think we can understand each other. So I wrote this book as someone who had spent quite a lot of time studying Anglo-American liberal tradition and liberal thought, and also someone who devoted a lot of time to study communism, not only as being a citizen of a communist country, but being a scholar whose job was to read books, sometimes hard to get hold of in Poland previously, but somehow I managed, and so this book is a result of both the experience that I had and also a result of my intellectual work that I was doing for quite some time. The conclusion of this book is not very optimistic, but I generally believe that moderate pessimism is more interesting than moderate optimism. Generally, optimism is dull, I would say, and it's characteristic of shallow minds. That's the general principle. Doesn't necessarily apply to myself, but so it's not terribly optimistic, but I think on the basis of the reaction that I had, I believe quite a lot of people find this book worth reading, and I'll be more than happy if also the Hungarian people in Hungary find it interesting enough to read and to talk about.
I should just add to that, if I may, that your book has been published in the United States, and I don't know about sales and that kind of matter, but I will say that I've come across a series of very, very strongly favorable reviews in leading American publications. So it struck a chord more widely than simply in either in Poland or in Europe.
Unbelievably, even the New York Times was kind enough to write something positive around that book, which should make me think now. Maybe there's something wrong with it.
Well, I'll buy one of these. This is 7,500, and I even have Hungarian.
And you are also, you get a free drink for that.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, hold on.
you.